Hi, my name is Ken Keffer, and I've taught at Center French, German, Humanities, abroad program since 1979. One of the passions that I developed during my time at teaching at Center was outdoor painting. And that started in about 1987. I have behind me an easel that I've used to paint many of the paintings I've done over the last 30 years. For example, here's a painting of the Gillespie Fountain, which is just turned on at Center College the other day. Painted that the day that it was turned on. This is a peculiar painting. It's one of some cattle resting on a hot summer day. I painted that with the outdoor painting club, the Plein Air group in Danville. What I use to paint, and by the way, the easel that you see here is the one I use to do the paintings that I'll talk to you about in the PowerPoint. What I use to paint with is obvious. It's not obvious, but it's acrylic paint. It's easy to use. It dries very quickly. I use basic colors like green and red and yellow. And I use brushes like this. The older, the better. And I use water to dilute the acrylic paint. And I paint outside. So what I'd like to do now is share with you a PowerPoint of some paintings I've done over the years to show you the difference between how things look in a photograph and how they look in the quick paintings that I do. I painted a lot outdoors, as I said, and one of the big problems of painting outdoors is the curiosity of the people around you and the climate. And when we were in Florence, Italy in 2015, it was very hot to paint outdoors, and I painted this church, Santa Maria, in Florence, and here's how my version ended up looking. In Florence, we also visited historic places. This is called the Old Bridge, the Ponte Vecchio in Florence. My version of it, which I, again, painted outdoors in the rush of traffic and the hubbub of people. This is how it looked. Painted a lot in Berlin in the summer of 2015. I did a series of about 20 paintings there. Here's a picture of a part of the Berlin Wall that still stands. And my painting of it makes it a little bit more attractive, I guess. Painted train stations. This is what's left of the train station that you just saw in Berlin after the war. I like doing train stations. This is an old train station in the heart of old Berlin, and this is how my version ended up. It was a very cold morning when I did this painting. I usually spend about an hour or an hour and a half outside painting. I like to paint churches and monuments most of all because they're readily recognizable. Here's the Presbyterian Church in Danville. My painting. I paint nature, of course, although it's hard to paint because of its intricacy. Here's an apple blossom and the blossoms on our apple tree in the backyard several years ago. When we were in Berlin, my daughter had an apartment that looked out over the skyline, and I painted that view of it from her window in her kitchen. We've traveled, thanks to teaching at Center College. Maybe someday you'll come here or to another college similar. We've been able to travel about a lot, and we traveled to England for the program there and made a really quick visit to Stonehenge right when it was closing. So I had about 20 minutes to do the following painting of some of the stones. I've given most of these paintings away to students. Painted the Houses of Parliament in of London. We visited the castle, the estate called Chatsworth. It was snowy in the winter. It's always one of the challenges, which is not readily evident in the paintings, is the challenge of the season and fighting against the elements, fighting against the winter cold, for example, to paint. In Berlin, we traveled around by bicycle and I painted the lake or the pond at Charlottenburg Palace, which is in Berlin, and here's a view of that. People would come by and compliment me on painting. They were surprised that anyone would stand outside and paint when they could take a photograph. But the theme of my presentation here is that paintings give you something more than a photograph. I paint books often for students who graduated. Some of my favorite students, or the ones I've got to know. I like all students. There's a bookshelf. And I don't usually put titles on the books when I paint the bookshelf. Leave that to their imagination. In England in 2013, we visited a little town near Chatsworth called Bakewell and had a stone bridge. And I painted in the snow. Just near us in Danville, there are plenty of beautiful places to paint. This is a picture, and these pictures aren't mine. I just took them off the internet to illustrate the difference between the paintings and the pictures. But here's a picture of Isaac Shelby, the pastor near Isaac Shelby Cemetery in Junction City. This painting highlights the wooden fence. Back in Berlin, I would go about in buses or on bicycle to find interesting places to paint. And this is an old stone bridge called the Oberbaumbrücke in Berlin. This is a fuzzy image of the new main train station in Berlin and my fuzzy version of it. One of the most difficult paintings I ever did, oddly, was in 2013 when we went with Tony Haig and students from Center to what the English call a football game, a soccer match at Fulham Stadium. And I sat in the stands and painted the game as it was going on. It looks pretty hard to interpret right now, but afterwards, when I carried my painting out of the stadium, people were surprised to see it and complimented me for it. That's always one of the advantages of outdoor painting. The compliments you get, the feeling of pride, of recreating something. Here's the stadium at Center College. You can see the C, the symbol of the college, and the yellow bleachers and the press box. I'll have another painting of that later. In England, we visited Dover Castle near the English Channel, and here's my version of it. It was foggy that day. We can barely see the castle. I gave this painting to Ashley, one of the students in that program. Do you know this place? This is Center College, Sutcliffe, and it's over here, if I can get my cursor, that I stood in this area to do a painting of the campus just recently when this redbud or ornamental cherry was in bloom. Painted naturally very famous places. This is the cathedral in Florence, Italy, called the Duomo. All of my paintings on this PowerPoint are a little bit more faded than they are, or much more faded than they are in reality. It's just a scene near Admiral Stadium in Danville. Just what I like about this is the clouds and the wires running over top of the pasture and the bales, the rolls of hay. It's fascinating to paint very picturesque spots. They're called picturesque because we like to do a picture of them, or we like to do a painting of them. This is in Strasbourg. It's called Little France, La Petite France. And I did this in the winter of 2014. Here's a fuzzy picture of Friedrich Schiller, who's a famous German writer of the 19th century, of the house he was born in. I got his house pretty much in focus, if you will. Maybe this lamp that's hanging in the street and all that's around it is vague and kind of evokes the other houses. I paint tools also, and I love the scythe. Here's some Austrian scythes and the ones that are hanging in my garage. Fun to paint trees. These are some trees at Perryville Battlefield. Again, the press box at Center College I did recently. It's fun, and it's been interesting to paint on campus when those students are there because of this coronavirus. There's the goalpost at Ferris Stadium, Joe McDaniel Field. I paint musical instruments, my Martin guitar, for example, with the music stand and its case. It was fun one of the advantages of painting a guitar is that you have a chance to paint its case, which is kind of a shadow of it. It's another guitar, another version of the same Martin guitar, this time with a music stand and a chair for perhaps playing classical music on the acoustic guitar, and another, the way I like in this painting, the way the guitar case crosses the Martin guitar in the background. You'll recognize this as new center tennis courts. Here's my version of it. It's surprising to find blue in place of green on the ground. So those are some examples of what's involved in painting. And I have, stop sharing. I have taken an interest in outdoor painting and the challenges that it poses, because it gives to what we see a kind of added value. Naturally, it gives us a personal connection, but it also trains us to adapt to circumstances. Painting is not just a theory. That is, it's not just a concept we have. We know that we want to do a particular painting if we want to do a particular scene. For example, these cattle that I painted, I knew that I wanted to paint them, and as you will have noticed in most of my paintings, there are not any people or any animals, and here was a chance to paint animals. It was a great opportunity, but my intention to paint the cattle was, let's say, limited by what the cattle finally wanted to do. If they just wanted to get up and walk away, then I had to change what I was painting. So this is what painting does. It teaches you not only about the beauty of what's around you, whether it's tools or animals or buildings or lakes or flowers, but it teaches you that what you plan to do, what you plan to do is limited by the materials you have. Do you have enough paint? Do you have the right brushes? By the weather that surrounds you. Will the wind blow your easel down? That's happened to me plenty of times. And whether or not you can stand the cold and stand the curiosity of onlookers. I think I'll stop there with sharing with you some of the painting I've done over the last 30 years. Thank you.